Good morning. I'm the Reverend Dr. William L. Johnson III here with our morning meditation. It is a joy, as always, to be able to share these messages, and I hope that you will hear this one especially today, because as we are traversing and traveling and doing all that we are dealing with during these summer months, we have so much happening in the world. We have things that are happening domestically in our political atmosphere. We have things that are happening around us in our families. We have entertainment, we have sports. All these things are happening and shaping our lives. In the midst of all of that, I hope that you can find moments of inspiration and encouragement as you navigate the now. Well, today's morning meditation is entitled, I want to just say it really quickly, Back to Life. Back to Life. Bear with me. I'm going to have a little fun with this one today. Uh, I remember being in fifth grade, and there I was in my fifth grade class, sitting around, and spring was dawning, and winter had passed. The flowers were blooming, and I looked out of the window of my classroom, and somehow I got transfixed and stuck into a no person's land. Yep, I was daydreaming and in a trance. And after sitting there, I don't remember hearing what the teacher was teaching about. I don't remember hearing my classmates. I don't even remember hearing myself, you know, as I was breathing or doing anything else. All I could do is imagine that I was in some other place in what some people will call some trance-like state. Now, not trying to go deep into that, just simply I was daydreaming. And in those moments in which I found myself daydreaming, I had ventured into a world in which I had created of my own that focused on whatever it is I was dealing with, that allowed me to escape where I was, not deal with realities that were happening right then, and to go to another place. And many of us, that experience is not just something I've experienced. Many of us have gone through that even in our adult years and on. But what I've discovered here and what I want to share with you is this really important uh, point of unpacking what it means to be in a trance-like state. I love what Mark Nepo offers to us as a reminder that sometimes being in a trance-like state is, or being in a trance really, is when we are struggling with discerning the difference between the fantasy world or the world that we've created or the place where we've invested all of our time and energy, whether it be a job or whether it be family or whether it be our careers or whether it be, our fantasy world on things like social media platforms. Those things are not necessarily real, but the more we're on them, the more time we put into them, the more sacrifice we make for them, the more that world becomes our world and we forget about the larger world. And there we find ourselves struggling sometimes trying to make the difference or discern the difference between what someone says on TikTok or what someone says on Instagram or what someone says on Facebook or what someone said on the television or getting carried away with sports or hearing what the politicians are saying here or recognizing what's happening all around the world until we replace our reality with that reality. And we cannot separate the difference. I'm afraid that we're in a climate now in which people are put into a place where they have become eh, focused almost in a daydream or a nightmare or whatever you might want to call it in a trance-like state. So I wrote down some things that stood with me. Mark Nepo writes this, and he says this, that no matter the importance of what it is we find ourselves in, maybe stuck in our past or the work that we do or in the dreams that we have, we are not our past, we are not our work, and we are not our dreams. And in those moments, when we find ourselves stuck in those moments, we think that's what we are. We are with whatever we're identifying with. I am tall. I'm a basketball player. I am a doctor. I am a nurse. I'm a preacher. I am a poet. I am all those things, but yet I am not those things only. I am more than that. In fact, those things can usurp us, pull us away from the realities of our lives. So let me help us a little bit today because I think dealing with this question of what happens when you are in this trance-like state. When you're there, it's hard to break out of it. It is like a bubble that has us paralyzed. We can't think out of the box. We can't allow ourselves to think of anyone else's opinion or idea, and think it might be in a place where it threatens our own, or we can't deal with the reality of another person's experience and think that their experience then must be discounted because it challenges our own ideas about what life and the world looks like. In these moments in which we're in, we find ourselves struggling with this trance-like state. I keep repeating it. It is like we have been pulled into a vortex that we cannot escape. And so I'm mindful of that. And as we are sharing today, I want to leave with you a couple of things about what happens when we're in that place. Uh, we don't get out of that trance-like state. We don't get out of that place where we're daydreaming until someone punctures the bubble we find ourselves in. Just like me in my classroom, it wasn't until my teacher called my name in a way that almost was shocking that my bubble and caused me to come back to the classroom and the reality that I was in. Many of us are finding ourselves in need of someone or something to puncture the bubble of our space where we've been our dreamlike, daydreaming, going off on our own, imagining what life would be like. Matter of fact, thinking that is really reality. So that we're angry with people that we don't have any beef with. We are frustrated by things that have nothing to do with how we live every day. We are overwhelmed by the conundrums of life that are other people's experiences but not our own. And then we are now tied up that reality seems like it's ours. That's why all the vitriol, that's why all the anger. Even as we are trying to serve other people, we are overwhelmed and inundated by too many images of violence and strife and frustration, and we long for the dreamland of something else that takes us away from the reality of what we're experiencing. Matter of fact, let me change that word. Takes us away from the deeper trance in which we're in. And we forget that life is not that thing, and we are not the things that we are experiencing only. We have something larger that we're in. So, whatever our investments, whether it be trying to create a new legacy or trying to open up a door or open up a new business, that thing is a beautiful thing, but it is not everything. So the trance-like state, or being in the trance, stuck in that bubble, is difficult to escape. I said that a minute ago. And beyond that, it also causes for us to never be able to see beyond it. But here's what happens when that bubble has been perforated or there is something that pushes us out. And here's what an example of that looks like. You've worked your whole life and you've tried to hold on to the job and do a good job in your career, only to find that your company decides to downsize and lays off people. Or you've been in pretty good health and discover that now all of a sudden parts of you, things are happening with you that are not as stable and as strong as they used to be. A diagnosis from the doctor or a call from the oncologist or some other situation, or maybe perhaps your investment is in your children and in your family, and you discover that things are not necessarily perfect in their world. They're going through some challenges, even though you were proud of them. Now they are running against some hills that are hard for them to overcome, and you discover those things. Or maybe it could be a relationship or a love relationship that you thought you were in love, but you don't feel in love right now. All of those things are like perforating a bubble, and the world in which we had built for ourselves no longer seems stable. And in those moments, they push us to do something different. And in these moments, I am saying now it's time to get back to life. You discover that everything that you poured into the thing that you were focused on does not mean that when that thing cannot survive, that life is over. You get back to life. You get back to living. And I want to encourage someone today, as we're sharing this message for our morning meditation, that as you are journeying, it's okay to get back to life. If I had time, I'd tell you my story of being a part of ministry and life and doing all those things, and to see how life and circumstances sent me on a detour. And then now, after all of these years, finding myself in a different position with a different mind and with a different heart and a different desire. My eyes are open. I cannot go back to the bubble or the trance or the daydream that I used to have, but I discovered that blessing was getting back to life and back to the things that make life worth living. So here's some things I wanted to share with you. I wrote them down, so don't mind me looking down here. Here's what I want to share with you when you get back to life and when the bubble starts to get perforated and it causes us to deal with what the puncture has left us. When we find ourselves getting back to life, we find that the puncture has left us in a way that it opens up the possibility of a whole new world. It is not until the old world, the old circumstances, the old commitments, the old challenges, the things that carried us, the world we were living in now seems to be in the place or the point of dissolving or finding itself to be no more, that we open ourselves up to the possibility of something new. And every now and then in our lives, it's important to note that every time something ends, it's not the end of the world, but it may just be opening us up to or birthing us into a new place, a new relationship, a new hope, a new dream. Not that that new dream should become our preoccupation to daydream about that or spend our energy about that, but to put our feet squarely on the ground so that the dirt still remains dirt and the sky is still sky and rain still feels like rain and joy still feels like joy and tears are real tears and even our pain is real. Not simulated, not what we see on television, not something that we present for all those around us, but our real lives come to life. And we can then be authentically ourselves, living our lives, not for other people, not for the career, not for the job, not for what other people will say about us, but for God and for ourselves and for the creator that made us and put us in the world. It opens us up for the possibility of such a new world. Secondly, I think it's important for me to share with you that it will also capture a possibility for living beyond the bubble. I think it's important to note that some friendships and some relationships, maybe you've experienced this in your life. You can join me in your thought process. That has anyone ever had a group of friends or people that were around that they almost get stuck in the same place? And so the conversations that you have are the same ones you had when you were teenagers or in your early 20s or when you were back in college or when you were in the old neighborhood or when you were around old family barbecue or the things that you used to do. That those moments and those conversations cannot traverse and cannot find a way to get out of the bubble of the context in which you were first formed. Sometimes that's what happens in life. And so that when we come back to life, we discover that it opens us for us the opportunity to experience life in a whole new way and to embrace the possibilities of what might come beyond that experience. So I want to encourage you that your next thing, whenever you have popped out of your daydream or you are no longer in the trance or no longer in the group or no longer obligated and pulled into the spaces in which you've been in, that you see a larger world, it also opens up other possibilities. Finally, and I want to share this quickly so that I can let you get back to living your life and in your day. It also can commit us to the promise of what it is that we are now experiencing and what is happening beyond our now. I've learned that everything that we do causes us to find new commitments and new courage to step into those places that we've never been. So I remember very keenly kind of doing things with my older brother. He was he loved adventure, and so that we would kind of find places to go in the woods and kind of hike. Even before hiking, we knew was a popular thing to do. We were young kids and we were exploring. And we would go to different places. And next thing you know, we're at a creek and then a crossing and in the woods and climbing trees. And my brother would always coax me by shoving me on to make sure that I would figure out how to take the next step after he pushed me into things. And I'm thinking sometimes that life will do that for us. Circumstances will shove us into the next thing, shove us into the next experience, shove us to getting another thing or another degree, shove us into a new relationship, shove us out of toxic circumstances, shove us out of those places where we've been stuck. And so that life sometimes happens to us like that, that we get shoved out of where we were and back into life. When I was doing graduate studies, I was in New York City, not New York City, excuse me, upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, in the city there, at Colgate, Rochester. And my favorite thing to do, you have to know that being in Rochester, New York, is in the winter and the summer are vastly different experiences, like they are anywhere. But when you're there, the snow comes down in the winter, in January, in those months. It just snows every 5 to 10 minutes. It just keeps snowing. And to my surprise, I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina at the time, and it just snowed. I used to laugh. I said, it snows every 5 or 10 minutes, and it never stops. And the city never stopped. However, during the spring, I would be back there, actually during the summer, the first months of June and first weeks of June, and discover all the beauty of Rochester, New York. Now, in Rochester, New York, in the summer, it wasn't that hot. It was 70, 75 degrees. Beautiful, felt like the best of spring, and we would go places and walk and enjoy ourselves. And we went on a prayer walk, where in which those of us who were in ministry find ourselves having to do something we haven't done probably in years since we were kids. We took our socks off, our shoes off, and we walked on the earth, connecting ourselves again to it as we thought about the value of being alive, what it meant to be a part of the soil, what it meant to be a part of life. And when your feet are back on the ground, I hope that you're hearing me. And when you're a part of life again, you value the place, that the time that you're with it, because you realize how much time you spent away from it. Let me make it really simple. There's some things about your family while you're busy building and putting money up and working hard that you might miss the years that your kids are growing up. And if you take a moment to get back to life, you realize that the value is not in the money that you have or how much you spend on the car or the home or the clothes or the bag or all those things, those accoutrements that look like you have success, but simply in the moments in which you have a conversation with those you love and they can talk back to you. You value life when you get back to life. So I am encouraging you to shake the trance. And when the bubble of your trance is popped or perforated or punctured, don't curse it because it happened. Don't be angry because you now are forced to try to do something different than you've been doing your whole life. Embrace it in a new way and discover that the best part of you is yet to be rediscovered, that you are now discovering that you are much more than the dad who works all the time to put food on the table. You're much more than the mom who is juggling 1,000 things trying to hold your family together. You're much more than the professional on your job that's trying to get the raise or to have the career goals met. You're much more than the family member who's always the one to be counted on. You're much more than the person that you have become or even imagined that you were. There's a big life for you. And in your doing all the other things and investing yourself in those things, you are more than that. And now life has now come back to you and said, now come back to me, back to life. I'm encouraging you, if nothing else in the pandemic took us through a place, it reminded us to appreciate what it meant to be alive. I hope we haven't lost that because of all the bickering and all the fighting. Listen, life is not promised, and the engagements that we have are not promised. Every flower that blooms during the spring and summer, every tree that gives us new leaves, those leaves are going to fall. The flowers are going to finally kind of get to the place where they no longer bloom. We find ourselves in these windows of time in which we take it for granted, but nature does not. I'm encouraging us to get back to life and enjoy the life, the one life that you're given. Anyway, thanks so much for hearing us out. Have a great day. I'm praying that you have a great week, and I'm praying that you have a great life because you're loved, you're appreciated, and you're irreplaceable. Don't let that go and live your life as if it's the only one that you have because in honesty, it really is. Have a great one. Bye bye.